As I was looking at this text this morning, I was just so astounded at what Paul says here, because I think to myself, can I say what he says here? Because I have a confession, like I am far off from what he's talking about here. So far away. And yet when I listen to what he's saying, it just reverberates in my heart. And I look at him and I go, man, I want to be like that. Because this guy is so in love with Jesus. This guy's life is so encapsulated and surrounded by Jesus that there was nothing else that mattered more to him than Jesus Christ. And I thought to myself, man, I want that. And so it led me to ask this question, what is life all about? What is life all about? What is the meaning of life? And to make it more personal, what is your life all about? Have you ever sat down and thought about that? What is my life really all about? I mean, you wear different hats. You maybe a mother, a father, a wife, a husband, a brother, a son, an uncle, and an aunt. But what really is your life all about? What is the meaning behind your life? I mean, we live in a world where science and technology are trying to make us live longer. Apparently, by the time we are, by the year 2050, which is not too far away, that's like 26 years away, the life expectancy of the average person on earth will be 78. Apparently by 2100, which is, I mean, none of us will be here in 2100, but well, if you live that long, SK, wow. It's going to be a testimony to God's power, eh? By 2100, apparently the average life expectancy will be 82. And so there's this innate desire in man to want to live longer. But for what purpose? I mean, there's no point in living to your 80s and 90s if your life lacks meaning. If your life lacks purpose, you're just existing. In a way, you're just taking up space. And I look at Paul here, and I'm just so astounded by the meaning that he found in his life. And I'm going, I want that. Like, I'm not there yet, but I want that. And he starts off in verse 20 of chapter 1. And he says, "For I fully expect and hope that I will never be ashamed, but that I will continue to be bold for Christ as I have been in the past. And I trust that my life will bring honor to Christ, whether I live or die. For to me, living means living for Christ, and dying is even better." But he starts off by saying, I fully expect. Now, this guy, when he wrote this, he was 62. And the average life expectancy of a man in Paul's day was 30. So he'd already lived double of what the average life expectancy at 62. But yet he's saying, I fully expect, there's this expectation that he's going to live longer and do greater things for Jesus. I mean, that retirement is like a modern invention. It only came about in the last couple of decades where, you need to save up a certain percentage of your income so that you'll be looked after in your old age. And, Shane, you've worked so hard and you've provided for your kids and everything. So retire when you're 65, and just chill. Now, I'm not against retirement. But what I'm saying is it's such a modern concept that I wonder if even retirement can keep us from really living. Can keep us from living a life of meaning and purpose. And he says, I hope that I'll never be ashamed, but that I'll continue to be bold for Christ. He's saying, I want to continue to be bold. And that word boldness literally means freedom from fear of any repercussions. So he's like, I want to be bold for Jesus to such an extent that whatever the repercussions are, whether I get flogged, whether I get killed, it doesn't matter, because my life really is about Christ. I will continue to be bold, he said. That's what I hope, he said. And I trust that my life will bring honor to Christ. Wow. Bring honor to Christ. You know that word honor literally means to physically enlarge. In other words, to make someone big. To make someone big. And I just wonder in my own life how big Jesus is. And I wonder perhaps there are other things in my life that are much bigger than Jesus. Perhaps my own sense of worry, my own sense of trying to achieve something in my life is much bigger than Christ. Perhaps my desire for financial security is obsessing me more than Jesus. I mean, how big is really Jesus to you? Because if he's not big to me, I can't make him physically big in the world. Like, I cannot enlarge someone when he is so small. And the funny thing is, Jesus is big. I mean, he is the creator of the universe and all the multiple universes that are there. But if he's small in me, then no ways I'll be able to make him big. And in that way, not bring honor to Christ. And then he says that famous passage, I mean, in your translation, it probably says, to live is Christ, to die is gain. But in my translation, it says, living means living for Christ. That's what living means. In other words, that's the answer to the question we asked earlier on. Living means living for Christ. I realize we spend our whole lives searching for meaning. I think, there's this pressure on you at varsity, that you need to discover your career, what you're going to be. You need to make sure you choose the right degree to study, because then you can work and earn money and find meaning for your life. And then you do that, and you study and you start working, and then you realize, but there's still this emptiness, right? Or you might be one of those people, maybe in your late teens or early 20s, you feel like, man, if I only found a spouse. You look around you and you go, man, everyone else has gotten married except me. If I can only find someone who loves me, then life will be meaningful. And you find it, and you still find that emptiness inside of you. I mean, there's nothing, we want to look for meaning in life. And here's the strange thing, is that Jesus doesn't give meaning to your life. Because Jesus is the meaning of life. Can I say that again? Jesus does not give meaning to your life, because Jesus is the meaning of life. And I look at Paul and go, how could he so confidently say that for me, living means living for Christ, and dying is even better, because then I will get to finally see him in all his glory, all his wonder, all his majesty. So the things that I'm experiencing now, just in a tiny quantity, then I'll be experiencing it fully. Man, I'm not there yet. I can't really say that I'm living fully for Christ, because I'm still trying to work it out. I'm still trying to search for meaning in so many different things. And then he carries on in verse 22. He says, but if I live, so if I carry on living beyond 62, I can do more fruitful work for Christ. I really don't know which is better. I'm torn between two desires. Like, I long to go and be with Christ, which would be far better for me. But for your sakes, it is better that I continue. And it's kind of like wrestling with these two desires. And it's two good desires, It's two like equal kind of desires. It's like Indian food or Indian food, like it's two great desires, it's like tandoori or, korma, it's Ferrero Rocher or Lint, it's two good desires. He's wrestling like, I want to go and be with Jesus, but Jesus still has work to do in these people, so I'd rather stay with you. Man, that's hard. It just shows me how much he loves people, actually. It just shows me that at 62 you wanted to go to be with Jesus, because he said, I've done it all. I've sacrificed my life for the one I love. But sure, I look around me and I still see you guys, and I want to stay some more years. Just for you, for your sake. Because he's almost like, as he's seeing the the image of Christ being formed in people. He's like, I want to see more of that. Like, I want to see you fully alive. And that's why I feel like being fully alive is living in gratitude to Jesus and for the benefit of others. That's what it means to live fully alive. To live in gratitude of Jesus and for the benefit of others. But you will never get to that point unless Jesus is big. Unless He's all-encompassing. Unless He's so beautiful and so marvelous to you. And then he carries on in verse 25. And he says, knowing this, I'm convinced that I will remain alive. So it's like, okay, knowing this, knowing that my desire is to serve the purposes of Christ in people's lives. He says, I am convinced. He's 100% sure I will remain alive so that I can continue to help all of you grow and experience what? The joy of your faith. He's saying, that's what I want to see. I want to see you grow and experience the joy of your faith. He was so convinced of this. And in a way, God honored him because he lived another 4 years. He lived till he was 66. He was martyred when he was 66. And so he lived well beyond the average life expectancy of men at the time. But this phrase gripped my heart when he said, I want to help all of you to grow and experience the joy of your faith. And I wonder how many of us have lost the joy of our faith over the years. They've been following Jesus for so long that it's become a little bit mundane. That we've lost that joy, we've lost that enthusiasm, we've lost that passion for Him and making His name famous. Like why? Why have we lost that joy? Why is it not bubbling from inside of us? You know, I've really wrestled with this because this phrase just leapt out at the page, leapt out from the page, and I thought, why has Christianity sometimes become a chore? You know, and I realized, and I thought about this the other day, and I thought about the fact that you can be so Christian and still far removed from Jesus. Right? I mean, we've created this Christian culture, the things that we do, and yet be so distant from the one who loves you, and the one who yearns for you, and the one who spends time with you. You know, I've been meditating on Psalm 63:3, which says, Your faithful love is better than life itself. And I will praise you for that. I mean, just think about it. This life which we want to preserve, this life which we want to just live as long as possible, the psalmist is saying, your faithful love is better than that. You see, you will never have meaning in your life if Christ is not the meaning of your life. If Christ is not big enough, if He's not beautiful enough in your life, you will continue to search and never be satisfied until ultimately you'll get to a point where you go, I just want to die now. Because I've been searching for decades and decades and I'm not finding meaning. See what he's saying here? He's saying, yeah, I want to be with Jesus, but I want to live some more. Because I want to see you experience the joy of your faith. There's nothing more intoxicating than happy Christians. There's nothing more viral than Christians who are so full of joy because of Jesus, irrespective of circumstances. So I wrote this down in my journal yesterday. I was meditating and reflecting on some things, and it's about 5 in the afternoon, and it just kind of hit me like a ton of bricks on the concept of the joy of your faith. And I started off by saying, this is nuts. Because I had a revelation, so I started off by saying, this is nuts. I just realized that I have lived my entire Christian life attempting to submit to Jesus as Lord, but never truly experiencing the wonders of His salvation as Savior. It is a crushing burden to try and please a God who is Master without truly experiencing His love as Father, friend, and rescuer. It's a crushing burden. Because that's how I got saved, I got saved by a primary school friend saying to me, Jesus is coming, and if you don't believe in Him, and you'll die and go to hell. So I got spooked into the kingdom of God, and I think because I started that way, my whole Christian life has been, you're Master, you're Lord, I need to submit to you, I need to do what you tell me to do, I need to try and please you, not really fully tasting His love for me as Savior and rescuer and friend. Then I carry on to say, self-salvation truly is a plight that befalls every human that has not tasted the joy and wonder of being rescued from self-efforts to achieve an identity. So that's how I've been living my whole Christian life. I'm trying to achieve something I already have. And that's why I get frustrated, and that's why I get bitter, and that's why I get angry, that's why I get fed up, that's why I get disappointed. And Jesus is telling me, I love you unconditionally. I've done it all for you. You just don't know my love from you yet. I carry on. Discovering the unconditional, sacrificial, costly love of God is truly the breeding ground for continual joy and lasting change. And that's when it hit me. This is the joy of your faith. And Paul is talking about to discover that sacrificial, costly love. Because sometimes we feel like the love of Jesus is cheap. Or we treat it as if it's cheap. But it's costly. That's how much He loves us. That's how much He wanted us. Then I carry on. Christ's finished work on the cross is truly marvelous. Something to be marveled at and treasured forever. I mean, SK just mentioned this morning, Christ crucified. Christ crucified. Christ crucified. Then I finish off by saying, the inner peace that comes from not having to perform for God in order to gain love and favor is true freedom. It's true freedom. You see, when Jesus says, I've come to set you free, He's come to set us free from the inner turmoil and the inner wrestle that goes on inside of us, somehow trying to please a Father that we think is always disappointed with us. Oh, if we could only see the love of the Father for us, we would be changed forever. You see, that's what drove this man, Paul. That's why he could say, for me, living is about Christ. No wonder, because he was a man. I mean, think about his background was about effort, right? I mean, he was, like he says later on in Philippians, I was a Pharisee of Pharisees. I ticked all of the boxes. I kept the law. And then what happened? Then he met Jesus. And he realized that all of that was nothing. I mean, how can we ever get bored with this Jesus? And he ends off with verse 26 there. He says, and when I come to you again, you would have even more reason to take pride in Christ Jesus because of what He is doing through me. He's saying, you take pride in Jesus, not in me. Take pride in Him because of what He's doing through me. He recognizes still today that He is who He is because of what Christ is doing in Him. I don't know if I'll ever get to that point as a Christian where I would say, for me to live is Christ. But I surely want to get there. Like, I want to get there. Like, I want Jesus to be my all in all. And that's the incredible thing. Like, when Jesus is all, your all in all, then you will live to serve others. Then you will live like Paul and you go, I just want to see you grow and experience the joy of your faith. Because there is joy in this, in the midst of everything that you go through. And I've realized that if there is no joy in our faith, then we have not truly seen Jesus and His love for us. You've not. It's as your own sense of self-righteousness that we feel like we can earn our favor from God. It's such a humbling thing, I mean, none of us know how long we'll get, Paul kind of knew this. Well, I'm convinced that I'll live longer. He lived another 4 years. None of us know if we're ever going to get to our old age. When I was young, late 80s, early 90s, we often used to get a call from my grandparents' place. They come quickly, like my grandfather doesn't have much more time. He's seriously ill. And so we used to get into the car. I remember my parents used to rush to my grandfather's place and, you just kind of waiting in the lounge, waiting for someone to come out of the bedroom and go, he's passed away. Like waiting, anxiously waiting. But all those times, like, they would come out and say, he's still alive. It seems like he's doing better. I mean, I can't remember how many times we would go there and we were also anxious and also tense. And this was in the late 80s and early 90s, before we moved to South Africa. Then in the year 2018, my grandfather was still alive in 2018. So just imagine, 2018. It was late, I think it was August, September, I can't remember the exact date. He said to his aunt who was taking care of him, he says, I'm wearing my best suit and my best shoes. He says, please take a picture of me today because this is the last day I will be going to church. It was a Sunday morning. And so he did that. My aunt took a photo of him. And 2 days later, on the Tuesday, he passed away.
Oh, wow.
You see, he was a man who knew when he was going to die. He passed away at 95. Having lived a full life, having been served as an elder in the church for 40 plus years, not longer. He lived a full life. He gave his all, and he knew when it was his time. I mean, how sweet that is when the Spirit whispers to you, you've only got a couple of days left. And when I looked at that photo that my aunt took, I thought, wow. He knew he was finally going home. He knew he was going to see the one whom he loved so dearly. It's time to say goodbye. You see, Paul, he lived till he was 66, and in those days, that was a long life. But my heart, my desire is that the beauty of Jesus would capture you so much that you can truly begin to say one day, for me to live is Christ. To really live is Christ. I shudder to think, this morning, okay, maybe this is overshare, but while I was on the bath toilet, I was listening to a podcast, and this man was just saying, he was quoting Matthew 7, and it's at the end of time, when these people stand before God and they say, look, did we not cast out demons in your name? Did we not do miracles in your name? Did we not do all of these things in your name? And Jesus says, I never knew you. That is so haunting. Like, you were not in love with me, and I was not working in you. Like, there was no visible, life-changing, efficacious transformation in you. This is the danger of modern-day Christianity, friends. Like, we've developed a Christian subculture that you can be a part of, that can make you feel like you are a Christian. It can make you feel like you're a Christian because you are doing all the Christian things. Like, you are attending church and you're serving at church and you're praying and all of these things, and yet be so far removed from Jesus. It's so dangerous, and no wonder so many people, after being Christians for decades, they leave the faith because they found this thing not real. I wrestled with that in my break because I reached such a low point. Part of it was my depression, but I reached such a low point that I started asking questions. Is my faith even real? Like, how can I prove that my faith is real? Just because I'm a pastor, just because I'm doing this thing, just because I'm preaching the Bible, how do I know that this thing I have with God is real? And he started showing me how he loved me unconditionally, even in those moments where I shook my fist at him. Even in those moments where I didn't want anything to do with him. Even though in those moments where I accused him of the most vile things. And that's when I realized, sure, I've lived my whole life with the wrong image of Jesus. You see, Paul thought he was serving God. You know, even the scriptures even say that there will be days where people will kill you thinking that you are doing God a favor. So sometimes you can be so zealous for God, but you're zealous for the wrong God. Not the true God. Not the God of the Bible. Jesus said, I've come not to condemn, I've come not to judge, but to save. See, those who have been saved, who are truly being saved, they're so filled with joy because they know how much Christ loves them. But I've realized that you'll never be able to see the beauty of Jesus unless you press in. You know those people, sometimes they annoy me a little bit, but like, they sit in the art gallery for hours. And they just look at this painting, you know. And I'm like, I look at a painting for a minute or two, I'm like, oh, that looks nice, and I move on, you know. And some of them, they just sit, and they sit for hours and hours and hours. You know why? Because they've learned to appreciate the finer details and what went into those paintings. They've learned to know what to look for. And so they can sit for hours. You know, when you can sit for hours with Jesus, that's when you know you love Him. You can just sit for hours talking to Him and engaging with Him. That's when you know you can't get enough. You know, when you have your time with Jesus every morning and you're like, man, this was too short, I can't wait to get back, I can't wait for the next day, I can't wait for this afternoon. That's when you know you're starting to get a glimpse of this Jesus. You're starting to appreciate His beauty and His wonder and His love for you. And so I would love for all of us to get to the point that Paul got. For me, living means living for Christ. Because Christ is the meaning of life. He doesn't provide you with meaning. And I think that's why we stumble in our faith. Because we come to Him, we say, yes, thank you for my salvation. But now you need to give me meaning, right? Give me that job that I want. Give me the salary that I want. Give me the family that I want. Then I will find meaning. And you end up searching. And you're so divorced from reality, so divorced from that Jesus, because He doesn't give meaning to your life. He is the meaning of your life. I cannot say that enough. And you find that you cannot switch off from this world because you're constantly going from one thing to the next, from one person to the next, from one task to the next. You cannot switch off from your phone even because you're just looking for meaning all the time. I'll end with this, this guy, I didn't plan this, but it just came to my mind. This guy, Christian guy, pastor, author, Christian celebrity, and a very chill guy, like not an intense guy, very chill guy, but he felt convicted one day that he needed to go on a retreat with the monks, right, for several weeks. And what this also meant was no screen time for 7 weeks. No phones, no TV, nothing. And so he said to his wife, look, I feel like I need to do this, So they drop him off in his monastery, and he just said he got so fearful as they drove away and he was there. The first thing he wanted to do was put his hands in his pocket with his phone, and obviously no phone. And he said the first few days in the monastery, he got such bad anxiety, right, that his body was shaking and he thought something was wrong, right? He started getting heart palpitations. So he wanted to Google to find out what was wrong, and obviously there's no Google to find out what is wrong. And he's freaking out. Like the first few days, he had withdrawal symptoms. But he said those weeks were the best weeks of his life because he slowed down first of all. That his life was no longer about doing and achieving. And he could actually start to discover Jesus again. In the wonders of creation, in the simplicity of life, and not have to go from one thing to the next. Because the reason why I mentioned that example, because it struck me so much that so much of what we do is actually divorcing us from the reality of God in our lives. And so often we're like, but God, you're not real to me, but we've not actually created the space for God to be real to us. To have that deep, intimate communion and fellowship with Him, that transaction. You know, Tim Keller in his book Prayer, he defines prayer as personal communication in response to the knowledge of God. So in other words, he's saying, to the degree to how much you know God is the degree to how much you're going to pray. So in other words, if you vaguely know God, if Jesus is small in your life, then you're not going to be praying. You're not going to be spending time with Him because He is small. I mean, what's there really to spend time with someone who is not of much value and worth and beauty? But the more you press into God, the more you realize, wow, there's so much to discover. And that's why I think this is what Paul's life was about. I mean, we often think that, look at the Apostle Paul, the greatest apostle who ever lived, planted churches all over the world, and he met Jesus on the road to Damascus, and off he went on his mission. No! The Bible does not say so, but history says that he spent more than a decade after his conversion just learning about Jesus. Trying to grow, because it was new for him, right? He was a Pharisee, he was steeped in the law. He spent more than a decade before he went. And so often when we look at some Christians, we go, oh man, they're so in love with Jesus, they're so full of the life of Jesus, but we think it just happened like that. Man, I just want to encourage you, press in to Him. There's so much to discover of Jesus. And the beautiful thing is that when you do, that's when you start feeling full of life and purpose and meaning. That's when you discover your true self. Like you will never discover your true self outside of Him because He created you in His image. And so if you're trying to discover your identity and meaning and purpose outside of Christ, you will never ever be fulfilled. Trust me, that comes from a man who's been a Christian for 30 years, trying to discover his identity and purpose in getting multiple degrees and being in ministry and trying to earn good money and having a family. None of those things can satisfy like Jesus. None of them. None of them. Jesus is the meaning of life. Jesus is the meaning of life. Let me pray for us.